in front of people is a fearful business, you know? There's so many ways that I can be wrong, or that anybody can be wrong. I might not dress appropriately. You might say, oh, I can't. I might speak too quiet. I might have weak ideas. I might use the wrong ideas, wrong words for good ideas. I might disappoint you in some fashion. It would be easy to be afraid of the fact that all of you are almost constantly judging me. I might bore you. That would be the worst. Today is even more of a problem. This week, as a nation and as a faith, we have been stunned by an act of unthinkable racial violence in a Charleston church. And I am afraid to talk about it. I'm afraid of minimizing the grief of those who feel the tragedy most powerfully. I'm afraid of doing violence to their feelings. I'm afraid of falling into some generalization that makes it easy to understand, but that reduces the complexity of the situation. I'm afraid of using words that would not do justice to the problem, the people, or this pulpit. I'm afraid. And yet here we all are in this little boat of ours, fearing the stormy situation, wondering where God is, and looking for safe ways to be on our journey. I'd like to talk about this Bible passage before us in the context of the fear that we bring to God in many different ways. Fear is the challenge, engagement is the solution, and Christian engagement is this amazing grace. Fear is the challenge. Fear was the challenge this week. Fear is the challenge in our hearts almost every day. And as America, we begin to understand that even though we have a vision of equality, even though we have a vision that we are all the same, that there is still a great fear of the differentness of different people in the world. There's a fear of different people who are so different that they are threatening, that they have different values, different histories, different feelings. It's easy to imagine folks who we see as different from ourselves as incompatible, inhuman, and even immoral. And so fears are in our country of skin and philosophy and culture. People are afraid of each other. It's racial fear, it's class fear, it's denominational fear, it's religious fear. It's the fear of being different and not understanding. And in the midst of this uncertainty comes this fear that causes people to strike out and do unbearably evil things. We fear chaos and change. We fear the storms of unpredictability. We fear a situation in which we're not in control and the waves threaten to overwhelm us and we're not going the direction we thought we were. We're afraid. And so we do unbelievably wrong things. There's a fear of violence, a fear of pain, and so in reaction to some things, we shut down the walls, the doors, and we are afraid of being hurt again by anyone. Fear is the challenge, not the storm. Engagement is the solution that Jesus offers in this passage. An engagement, a coming to grips with. Not a hiding, not hoping it will somehow go away, not saying we solved this problem 20 years ago or 50 years ago, or not saying, really? We don't have that. Jesus rebukes the wind. is chaotic and apparently uncontrollable. The wind that you would think is a problem in this situation, but you don't bother to talk to the wind. And yet Jesus engages the wind, rebukes the wind. And sometimes we're in situations in which it seems overwhelming and stupid to try and reach engagement. They're just going to be the way they always were. Sometimes it feels like wasted breath, wind, to talk to some people. And yet even Jesus rebukes the wind, engages the wind, says the wind, the wind, you're wrong here. Jesus talks to the problems of the disciples too. The faith thing is what's the issue here. You don't understand. You haven't got the big picture. Even if you die, it's not a thing to be feared. Even if there's trouble, there's ways of getting through it. And he tries to address the fears of the disciples by getting the larger picture, by understanding the engagement of the bigger ideas that are at stake, not the problems, but lift your eyes to behold the larger truth, Jesus says. This is the larger idea that can rescue you from any situation or storm. Jesus addresses their fears, our fears, in this engagement of the fears, not a denial, not in running away from, not giving fears power by ignoring them, but by understanding, engaging the fears and their perceived causes. Christian engagement. All right, so Jesus shows us a kind of engagement, the necessity in the midst of fear to talk to one another, in the midst of fear to sort of move towards what is uncomfortable. And we move towards things in a particular kind of way as Christians. We move towards problems and fears and storms in a forgiving and graceful way. So the challenges are fears. Jesus' solution is a kind of engagement, and this kind of engagement is a gracious engagement, an engagement full of forgiveness and action for the future. And if you want to cry, go on the web and see the people whose tears are not yet dry from the grief of losing the people that they loved, forgiving the man who shot them. If you want to understand the depths of forgiveness to which we are called, watch the engagement of forgiveness in its most desperate situation. That is, someone who killed brutally someone who was loved, and they face him and forgive him. Almost unimaginable, amazing gracefulness. This is the particular kind of engagement to which we are called and to which we often fall short. We want to punish, we want to protect, we want to distance, we want to wall off, we want to segregate, we want it to go away. And until we understand the Christian admonition, challenge, and vision of an engagement that is graceful, we will always be in a situation of bunkers, cowering in fear, reinforcing each other's fears about who is on the other side of the wall. Christian engagement is an amazing grace and calls for an act of forgiveness that is the greatest challenge. Without fail, when people talk about the benediction that I give most every Sunday, they say, the hardest thing is to give no person evil for evil thing. Because it's such a natural kind of thing to want to hit back. But we are often in situations in which the natural thing is not the correct thing. The disciples were in this boat, and fight and flight didn't seem to make sense. They started taking it out on Jesus, the fight and flight. impulse in us when fear arises, when situations of conflict arise, when storms arise, that we have to get used to the idea that there's something more than fight or flight. That we cannot take for granted again this psychological principle and understand ourselves to be people of faith that transcend even things like death. Christian engagement is this amazing grace that has forgiveness as a component and has action for the future. Because we are able to forgive, because we are able to hope for a different world, we are not paralyzed by this fear or this tragedy, but that we still ordain people to do the work of God. That we still gather together and say there are tasks before us to do to change the world. That we are called to a larger vision. That we are the agency of God. So what shall we do? How shall we move past our fears and our foibles? This is not the only storm that we will face as people or as individuals. This week it is this tragedy. Next week it will be another tragedy. Next week there will be something happening to you individually rather than to us corporately. And those will be the most damaging fears because you will be afraid to talk about those fears, those storms that you think are happening just to you. Those will be the storms that are most fearful. They will paralyze us on a regular basis. The acidic ice of anxiety will flow through our veins. And we will wonder, where is God in this? We gather together as a people of faith to hold each other's fears and to attest to the power of God that walks with us. It is what we do every Sunday morning to remind ourselves, in the midst of the nightmares, there is the dawn. In the midst of the cycles of fear and anxiety that go through our mind, there is a God that tells us not to be afraid and that breaks through, breaks out of the tomb of fear into the light of day. We will face our anxieties without quickly blaming any one variable, whether it's flags or guns or lies. We shall not settle for easy answers that blame other people, because easy stereotypes are a part of the problem. We shall engage the problem, humbly understanding our role in it, and work together for a new understanding and a peaceful new way of relating. We are all ordained this week. We have been commissioned by the events of this week. There has been in our nation a hand laid on our shoulder to say that it shall not be this way again. And we have been commissioned to a new vision of how we shall be together. We have been commissioned by these storms, commanded by the Savior, and we need to be prepared to walk on water, or at least move past our fears. Let us design together new flags of peace, new plowshares of security, new venues of courage for new truths. And let us do this together joyfully, drawn through our tears, through a vision of what we can be together as a nation, as a faith, as a person. We can do this because we have a God who meets us and calms the storms of our fears at every turn. At Bethlehem, the angels cried, "Be not afraid." At the tomb, "Do not be afraid." In the storms, "Peace, be still." Be not afraid. I go before you always. Come, follow me, and I will give you rest. Speaking in front of people is a fearful business. And yet, today, in hundreds and thousands of pulpits all around the nation and all around the world, people are speaking the truth in the midst of their fears. It is difficult to talk to our children, and yet we must, and we will. It is difficult to talk about big problems, yet we must, and we will. We gather together as the community of faith with this God that works in us, and we follow this God in the name of the Creator, the Redeemer, and the Sustainer. Amen.